Hello, friends and brothers. This is Justin Jones with Masonic Improvement. I'm joined with my co-host, Brother Dennis Yates. How you doing, Dennis?
I am vibrating right now. I'm so excited. This is our Super Bowl season. This is the road to Grand Lodge, and some of my favorite people are online with us. Not just our inner circle members, but also some of our best friends and brothers. Brother Robert Park and Brother Carlton Newberry. Say that three times fast. And they're here to walk through this journey of the resolutions of 2025 with us.
Thank y'all for coming on. It's very exciting.
Yeah, thank you for having us on. I'm excited as well. And today is my birthday as well. So this is great. This is a great way to end it.
Happy birthday.
Yes, go into the office, catch up on some work on law, and then end the day with some brothers talking about other law. I'm sure it's a great day.
Very nice.
Well, happy birthday, Robert, and I thank you both for coming on. It means the world to both of us, and I'm glad that we'll have clarification for all the things that we do not understand because we have little pea brains.
So, just for clarity's sake, last year when we did this video, we read the entire resolutions for most of them, and it's monotonous. So, when possible, I encourage anyone that's listening, as well as the inner circle that's also on the show with us tonight, pull up your resolutions that were sent to you. They're emailed through PDF, so everybody should have a copy. Follow along, and if there's any resolutions that even the esteemed brothers here don't really know how to interpret, we'll talk through those. But when possible, we're going to refer to the resolution, and we'll talk through it. But I want to avoid reading word for word as many of these as we can, because I want to dive into these and get to what they're really talking about. So if we can, that's what I like to do. If there's some that need the clarity, or if we really just, if it's just something that needs us to read through it, we'll do that. Does that sound acceptable?
That sounds fair to me. Ultimately, we can leave out most of the whereases, and because everybody has their own whereases on everything, right? And get straight to the meat and potatoes with the therefore be it resolved. And that way we can say, what they're telling us that they want to get done.
Sounds good. All right. Well, let's just jump right into we'll roll with that then, Dennis. Let's just jump right into resolution number 1.
Actually, should we do holdover resolution number 4?
You're right. I'm sorry. Wow.
That's okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I know. Already trying to hide everybody.
Well, let's jump into holdover resolution number 4 then.
Park, will you explain what a holdover resolution is real quick? Kind of help everyone understand why this has come up.
Oh, because if you're going to amend our Constitution, this is the way you have to do it. You can't just vote on it at one Grand Lodge session. It has to be proposed and then hold over before it's voted on again. And that's what we're doing here, since this is an amendment to the Constitution. It has to go through those 2 votes, basically.
Mm-hmm.
A lot like bylaws.
Yes.
Exactly. I mean, that's it. I'm just trying to keep it real for our listeners.
Yeah.
Well, and this actually underscores one of the reasons why it's so important for us to show up again this year. Because last year, the first vote on this was very definitive. And we would hate for the brothers who had their voices heard last year not take the opportunity to make sure that their voices heard again this year to solidify the work that we started last year.
Yeah, this is an important one to me. I think it has broad support, but it just gives accountability and more power to the Grand West. I don't see why that would be a bad thing with anybody. I like that we now, if this passes, we'll have a mechanism to call a special session, which I think is a very important thing. And yeah, again, I think it does have broad appeal from what I've heard, though.
That's good.
And from just so that everybody remembers, it is a mechanism where 50 lodges or a majority of the trustees could call a special session, where in the past it was just the Grand Master could do that.
Correct.
Yes, and within 90 days of calling that session, then it would basically be done, and everyone would get to go to Grand Lodge. And if there is a quorum, then the matter can be resolved. So it's a very important resolution that we haven't had, that some people would have, really loved to have had in years past, for sure.
Well, and I spoke from the floor on this, from the podium. And, one of the things I said was, nobody's going to call a special session to get themselves in trouble. No one's going to volunteer to go to the principal's office, right? Or, I guess I'm old enough to go to the coach's closet where the paddle comes out, So, it's one of those things where accountability is key, especially for the men who have given their all to be our grand servants. They also need to be accountable.
Yep. Agreed. And if anyone does not, and me and Dennis talked about this before, like, we can give our own opinions, but y'all are just kind of interpreting, but you're welcome to give your opinions if you want to, but we don't want to get anybody in trouble. But I'll just say, if anyone doesn't want accountability, you really should ask why. Why do you not want to be able to be held accountable? What are you doing?
Well, now we'll get into another resolution later that I just am totally against, and it has to do with transparency and accountability. But we'll have to get to that later. Let's move on with this one. I am actually in agreement with this one. I think that everyone it was like almost a super majority vote on this one last time that it passed. At the last grand session, it was a huge number. It wasn't your normal, 51-49 split. It won by pretty large margins.
Well, there were quite a few super majorities last year.
Yes.
All right, let's move on. Let's move on to resolution number 1 then.
There we go. Take it away.
This is the one. I think there's something wrong with the way this one was printed. Because if you read through this, there's a giant whereas clause after you have the therefore be it resolved. So I'm a little confused about this one. I think there's a, not substantive, but I think there is a, formatting error with this one. But again, I think what this one is trying to do, and Dennis, you correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just supposed to basically cap the fees for, some of these, like the Warden's Retreat or the OLT. And but again,
Secretary School.
Basically what it is with the OLTs. Yes, I think you're right. It's saying that it shouldn't be more than 10%. If it is above 10%, then it's not just a profit to the education committee for their coffers. It's an immediate donation to either the Texas Masonic Charity Foundation or the Vanguard Lodge program.
Yeah. How much of a profit are we making on these? I didn't know the education committee was making a profit on these.
It never did in the past until 2022. All of a sudden, we became an education committee that tried to make a profit, and it was a pretty big sum of money. And since then, they've continued on that part. Back in the day, and forgive me if I speak too much on this, but back in the day when our mentors and friends, Chris and Brad and Larry Fitzpatrick, when they were all on the committee, John Tolbert, I mean, the list goes on, Richard Schlaudroft, when all of them were on the committee, their goal was to educate the Masons, right? It wasn't to make a profit. It was to break even, educate the Masons, do what was best for the constituent lodges, to elevate admin and hopefully help with increasing value of the lodge. Well, in 2022, I happened to be a part of the education committee that year, and it went to a proposal of for profit, and it really ticked me off. I really got upset about it. I wasn't the one that wrote this. As a matter of fact, it was Rip Moore that wrote this resolution, and I'm still kind of up in the air about it, because I don't think there should be more than a 10% profit to even give to those charities. So,
but I do understand, Dennis.
Y'all discuss this. Y'all discuss it from here. You've heard what I have to say, but that's what the gist of this is that
I do have a question though. What was the profit going towards? If it was going to the education committee, what were they doing with it? What was the proposal?
I don't even know that it was going towards the education committee. I thought
it was, and it went to the Grand Master.
it was a feather in somebody's cap. Look at all the money we raised for Grand Lodge doing this.
Oh,
yes.
It should have been a
passing on to
service
Grand
for the
Lodge.
lodges. Yeah.
Okay.
If I could just real quick, on some of these events that they do in the smaller cities, only living in Houston, could you say another city of 1 million people is a smaller city? But in some of the smaller cities where they don't have the turnout for some of these events, the cost per person is higher. And as we all know from throwing Masonic events, attendance is highly variable. It's very unpredictable. So sometimes they're like, well, at this event, let's just pick a city, we'll call it Smith City. We're only going to have 36 guys there to share the cost of this, versus in Houston, where you have, 100 guys, 78 guys show up. So to rent a space, to provide a meal, to pay for the travel of the people putting it on, because that's something we do, because these are volunteers. I understand how the prices can be variable, but when there is, when you're like, well, we're going to budget for 35 guys because that's what we had last year, and you have 48 show up that all pay, and then the profit becomes, oh, well, we made 17%. I think Rick's done a really good thing here and said, well, if you're going to make that extra 7%, and again, maybe it's not, I'm going back to that conversation we had the other night, Dennis, trying to assume the best. Maybe it's not intentionally trying to drive a profit, but if it does exist, then it's shared among other good things that we need to do.
That'd be good.
Well, that's a good point, but let me just explain how it's all been figured out in the past. The Grand Lodge knows what it costs for all the different events, all the different venues throughout Texas. In fact, it was down to a science. We were using the same places in every city, and we had a lot of the same expenses in every city, with a slight variation of increase or decrease. We already had that figured out as to, we know which ones make money and which ones lose money. In fact, the only one that really lost money was the one in Corpus Christi, and that's because we rented out the Omni Hotel for everybody and had this big shindig and paid for everything, and had buses carry people back and forth to the Lexington and all that kind of stuff. And so it was a little bit of a loss every year, and it was a pretty summable loss. However, all the other areas except for Lubbock always made money. Mm-hmm. And so this year, the way it changed is that they moved around to different venues all over the place. Instead of having, let me not say this year because I wasn't on the committee this year. The last year that I was on the committee, instead of doing what we knew worked and what we knew was reaching the Masons and was still affordable, we increased the cost, and we started going around to different venues. And instead of having meals brought in, officer leadership team was not only expected to come and teach all the programs, create all the programs, travel back and forth to all these different places, shuffle around, but they were also expected to serve and clean up and all that kind of stuff behind all the different aspects of the event instead of having people do that for us. All of this was to save money and to create a profit. And it was, I'm not going to say the dollar amount, but it was a very sizable amount of money. We're not talking about hundreds of dollars. We're not talking about just thousands of dollars. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in profit for the year. So it could have been done differently and didn't need to be the way it was. And I still feel like it doesn't need to be that way, especially when, you know, you've got lodges that are struggling that really need officer leadership training. And you got guys that, like in Lubbock out in West Texas, it's hard to get to them. And if they can't get more than 15 people to show up to it, then they're just not going to go at all. And they'll offer to let them come to Fort Worth free of charge, but then that doesn't include all the hotels and all that kind of stuff for the people for the travel. It ends up costing them, you know, 2 times, 3 times more than what it would have cost them if we had just shown up in Lubbock, where we could have afforded it before. We can no longer afford it, and it gets canceled now. So I don't think it's necessarily the right way to go. And I'm not going to harp on it anymore. That's up later. I know that's up to everyone else to decide.
Dennis, I'm glad that you're talking. I did not know this. So just again, what you're saying is the cost was increased and what we were giving people like decreased, basically.
In my opinion,
I would say
that's open to interpretation.
I would say that fundamentally, I agree with any lodge or Grand Lodge running itself like a business. However, and as we discussed this in a very recent video, training, when you're training your leaders, it costs money. And the dividends it pays isn't in profit, it is in having skilled leadership in your lodges and your Grand Lodges and things like that. And so to that point, OLT, Secretary of School, things like this, these are investments in our lodge officers. And the lodge loses money on it, but I don't necessarily think that, I agree. I don't even like 10%. I don't like 10%. I feel as though if we can't come out even at the Grand Lodge level, it's acceptable in situations like this to come in a little red because you're investing in your leadership. And to Carlton's point, if you charge more at some rural location, say Lubbock, because Lubbock didn't even, like you said, in 2022, Lubbock didn't even have a OLT. If you charge more because you have less people showing up, these are areas that need this the most, and they're being penalized. And these lodges are already suffering from a lack of training. And now we're going to say we're going to charge you more for that same training. So I wholeheartedly agree. Like, this is one aspect of business. Like, training should not be monetarily profitable. It should be the dividends you see from this should be in the results from the lodges themselves.
The lodges should profit, not Grand Lodge.
Exactly.
I agree with you 100%. This is not like a fundraiser. This is not like selling coins or anything like that. This is something that you have to do, and we're trying to milk people out of money on that. Like, I agree with you between the traditional business and the servant leadership aspect. This should not be a profit-making venture here to train people up to be lodge officers.
Agreed.
That is ridiculous.
Well, so granted, I'm glad he did something to try to curb what's been happening, but I still don't think. I think we should relook at the model and not necessarily put in a new law to coax the palate of people like me to that new model, right?
And Dennis, wouldn't this just push people to the life program? Like, if you're going to increase the costs and lower the expectations, you're just going to push people to the other alternative, which again, the life program's fine, but these programs, the OLT, are amazing if done correctly. I mean, some of the best times I've had in Masonry was back when Brad and Chris were on the committee, and we do that
Yes.
talk with Richard Schlodroff and John Tolbert. I
Oh
mean,
man, tell
those are
me.
great times.
Yes. Talk about, really valuing being the dumbest person in the room. I mean, that's one of those points that you realize that at least you're in the room.
Sounds
All
like
right.
we pretty much agree on this. Let's jump into resolution number 2.
You want to take this one, Carlton?
Oh, I reckon. So, resolution number 2 addresses with something that's kind of new to us in Texas Masonry. In the past, when a charter was seized by the Grand Master, when he ordered it to be seized, normally they would give an enumeration of what the specific charges were. And what we saw in 23 was that there was a charter arrested, and they were told, it is my understanding from talking to several people involved, they were told what areas of Grand Lodge law were broken, but they were not told when, how, what evidence there was to it, any of that. So they take the charter, and they don't have anything until they get in front of the Grand West. They have no way to prepare a defense or to make a correction, if a correction is what is called for, to plead ignorance and say we'll do better and we'll do it with oversight. There was not that opportunity really given. It would be exactly the same as if somebody came to you and a police officer showed up at your door and said, "Hey, man, you're charged with embezzlement." And you're like, "Embezzlement from what?" And he's like, we'll tell you when you get to court." "But who did I steal from?" "We'll tell you all that when you get to court."
Mm-hmm.
Where did this supposedly happen? "We'll tell you when you get to court." And so it's what this resolution does, which has never been necessary before, but now we've seen that it can be necessary. It requires that at the time that the charter is arrested, and a lot of times the Grand Master is not there, district deputies go and do it. I know several district deputies that have had to have that unfortunate duty, and each one of them has told me it is an absolutely gut-wrenching thing to have to do. And I believe each and every one of them that have told me. But they would be furnished with, and it says it very clearly in here, that at the time that the charter is suspended or arrested, the worshipful master and secretary of the lodge will be provided with a written copy of an enumeration of each Grand Lodge law, edict, or resolution that the lodge is alleged to have willfully violated, and a description of how the lodge is alleged to have willfully violated the law, edict, or resolution, including but not limited to the dates, location, and involved members, if known. So it's, in our regular law system, and please forgive me for getting out of my lane, Brother Park, but there's a thing called discovery where you have to present your evidence, and it has to be well in advance to give people the opportunity to either fix what they did wrong, if they didn't know it was wrong, or make amends if they did it and they knew it was wrong, or to say, actually, these guys weren't there on that day. This never happened. We don't know where you got this from. We're not guilty. And that's what this does, is it just forces the hand in an administrative way of them to say very clearly what the lodge is charged with and how they're charged with violating those laws.
Brother Park?
I'm in 100% agreement with this one. I mean, we mandate that if charges are brought against an individual Mason, they have to be stated with specificity. You have to tell them what the charges are. If you're pulling the charter from a lodge, it's a pretty nuclear option. And, just like if you charge a brother Mason, you should tell the lodge what they did wrong. They should be set down specifically, because we've run into this. I mean, and a lot of times they'll know, like if you're violating, if you're doing, certain types of fundraising with raffles and we tell you not to do that and you do something that gets us in a lot of trouble, Like I've seen that happen. If you sell property without getting Grand Lodge to sign off on it, you're going to get your charter pulled. I mean, those things are pretty simple, but I've seen a lot of cases where the lodge legitimately didn't know exactly why their charter was pulled very recently and asked for information about it, was told that information didn't exist. And then later on at Grand Lodge, they see that there was information. There was a whole investigation done, and they learned about it right then when they're having to present their case to the Grand West. And that to me is not okay. I think this resolution, anyone who is against this resolution, I would like to know why.
Can you just stand up? All three of you votes. Can you just stand up at the podium and explain yourself, please?
I'm sure we might get someone at Grand Lodge that stands up and says something. I just can't think of a valid reason why you wouldn't want this to pass.
Oh, they'll say something, I'm sure. Won't necessarily be good or valid or anything, but there'll be something. But
right.
it sounds like something you'd hear about third world country. Like you went somewhere on a vacation and it went terribly wrong and you got charges filed against you and they don't have to tell you what they are, you're just being held against your will.
You don't want to do that in Mexico. That's all I gotta say.
So I'm just saying, like to have that in Freemasonry, it's really, I'll say this, it is a shame that we have to have a resolution for a law like this, but it is necessary. And I could see wholeheartedly precedents have been set and we had to be prepared to defend ourselves against that in the future.
Can I just make it here real fast to what you just said? Because this comes up a lot. There's a lot of people who are always asking, why is our law book so big? Like, why can't we just get rid of all these laws that don't do anything? Having a big law book is a good thing. It means that the Grand West is actively involved. And if you're not doing stuff like, there are reasons why we have to do stuff like this. And there are reasons why our law book is pretty long, is because we're very actively engaged in the craft here. And so I think, a long law book is not a bad thing. I know a lot of people don't like it, but it actually shows that, we're doing good things here as the Grand West.
Good way of looking at it.
That is a good way of looking at it, because I am one of those minimalist guys, because, I'd rather be the one that breaks the mold and is the reason that a law needs to be created. But so I would like for it to be a lot smaller so that I can be the one to create those laws, be the reason for creating them. But you're right. I mean, this shows that we are actively engaged in what we're doing, and I guess the sad thing is that some of the stuff on here in our law book is just at a point to where I can't believe we have to have a law for this.
Yeah.
That's what's disheartening.
Now you see the reason why.
You have to have it, but that's what's disheartening, is that there's a reason we have to have it. That's what's disheartening. So I'm in agreement as well. I think that this is necessary. There's too many lodges right now. When I became secretary of OSO, the big thing at OSO was, everybody's in fear of getting the charter pulled, because they were threatened with it twice last year over stupid crap. I mean, absolutely inbred, in-house, stupid crap. And so, I think that something like this is definitely called for, because that would eliminate any chance of it being just some internal quarrel that a friend of the Grand Lodge, gets them involved and wreaks havoc on a lodge. That's my reason.
I'll just say before we move on, if the Grand Lodge law book doesn't provide you a means of defense, then it provides someone else a means to weaponize the law book against you.
Correct.
So that's very necessary. All right,
I'm going to next one.
Yeah, let's move on to a happier topic.
Exactly. That's why.
Resolution number 3. Thank you very much. So resolution number 3, we all know that there are certain lodges. One of them is my own.
Dang.
My own, that the brethren, even though we have financial difficulties, simply don't want to raise dues or endowments. And they don't want to do that. And the argument is always very similar. Well, it hurts the poorest among us. the oldest among us, those on a fixed income, so on and so forth. And I understand that. And what this does is those lodges that keep their endowments at the minimum of 5 units or $500. Right Worshipful Billings has submitted resolution number 3 that says for those lodges, and it doesn't specifically say only if they're at the lowest, but for those members that come in and they have the means and they say, you know what, I'm going to add a few more units because you can buy extra units, as many as you would like, to help secure the future of our lodge. Because I know that brother so-and-so, it took everything he had to get a $500 endowment. I'm going to go ahead and add $500 to my own so that the two of us, should I become destitute and not be able to give any more than my $500, both of us will give a little more. There'll be a little more from each one of those endowment units. And with 15 units between the two of us, that might cover our per capita for a few years and not hurt the lodge. So what Brad did was he came up with this, Right Worshipful Billings, and said, we should establish a legacy builder award at the Grand Lodge level for any Mason that adds an additional 5 units or more on top of his initial endowment purchase, and that the awards would be presented at Grand Lodge, and Grand Lodge would bear the costs associated with producing the jewel or pin or whatever recognition they give, certificate, just to recognize these brothers. And again, it's one of those things that we talk about where every brother has something to offer. A lot of times it's not money. I remember when I was first made a Mason, I didn't have an extra 2 nickels to rub together. I had 3 young kids. It was just setting money on fire every day with whatever they broke, got sick with, hospital bills, diapers, the whole thing. So I get it. So for those that have the means to contribute financially, this is just a little award to say, hey, you went far above the minimum. And I think it's fair because we already reward brothers with the Golden Trowel Award that contribute in other meaningful ways, right? We talk about and we give certificates for brothers, life certificates for brothers that have the gift and dedicate their time to learning all the esoteric works that we have. This is a way to help those brothers that are able to and choose to help their lodges financially.
Is there no
Go ahead, Justin.
Well, you think I have something to say about it?
Well, I do, but I was going to let you go.
I'll say this. I don't preface this. I have a lot of respect for Right Worshipful Billings. I love Right Worshipful Billings. He's a great guy. I'll say I don't dislike this resolution. However, I really, and this has come from someone who just as easily could have submitted a resolution, so I'm being a hypocrite here. But I really feel as though if we're taking the time to create a resolution for endowments, this would have been a great time to Brother Newberry's point. I mean, there are brothers that can't afford higher endowments. To look at, but to backtrack, this would have been a great opportunity to have looked at like some kind of a tier system or something where if you're younger, an endowment costs you more, and if you're older, retired, is $500 or something like that. For the reason that has been stated, like it even says in a resolution, you lose a little bit of money right now on $500, or we could have just raised the floor on it altogether. But Justin,
Justin, if I could interrupt just for a sec.
Yeah.
I like where your head is, but having been involved in at the Grand Lodge level since 2013, every time we've tried to raise that floor, it has had a resounding no.
Oh, I have no doubts. It
has had a resounding no, and for the reasons we enumerated earlier.
Yeah.
And so
that's not any shock.
Yeah, and he's not saying this is the only solution, but this is a way to recognize those brothers, because we already recognize brothers that give of their time to teach and learn the ritual.
Mm-hmm.
We, for guys that participate and lead at Lodge, we have the Gold Trowel Award. This is just a way to recognize those guys who have the means and decide to make sure the lodge will be healthy currently and after they're gone.
Yeah, yeah, and I can acknowledge that. And this is by no means a criticism of this resolution. Like I said, I don't dislike the resolution at all, because there are issues with the endowment at $500 in many lodges. So this is a nice little way of encouraging people to contribute extra. Dennis, you said you had something? Oh,
Go ahead,
I'll add
Park.
my 2 cents. I'm ambivalent towards this one, honestly. And Carlton, I get what he's trying to do here, and this is good. You're using the carrot here. You're saying, in Masons we do like pins, and we like award. It's good to reward people who do this sort of thing. I just, I mean, this might help. I just don't know if the people that are going to help their lodge out like this want an award or would do it because there's an award. You have some people that wouldn't want to be named, by doing this, and I get what he's trying to do here. I just don't know. I'll have to wait and see if this actually changes anything. I mean, it does get the idea out to people that you should probably be thinking about your lodge and doing this, but I don't know. I don't really care either way.
To your point, I think this is something we should already be encouraging endowment members to do, like contribute a little bit every year, and then we'll buy more units or something like that. It doesn't have to be $500. You could add $100 a year and buy a unit that way or something like that. It is something we should be encouraging in our lodges already. At $500 for a piece of paper that probably won't even be in a frame. I don't know that that's worthwhile. But if you're doing the carrot stick thing, that's an expensive carrot. I'll just say that. But like I said, I say that with the understanding I don't hate this resolution. Let me be clear. Despite how it sounds, I don't have an issue with it. That's just me thinking out loud.
I really think that a lot more people would be comfortable with our conversation if instead of saying carrot, we would say green bean.
There we go. Creepy.
Yes. Yes, you just got my buy-in. So I'm a lot like Park, and I really don't care either way. I think that it's a good thing to encourage people that might be on the fence, that might want that certificate. I mean, I think it's kind of cool that I get to go to a free lunch every year at Grand Lodge if I choose to with the Sam Houston Hall of Fame. I think that's pretty cool. But I didn't buy it for that, but I think it's kind of cool. I don't know. I'm a bad person because I don't even go to that lunch every year. I haven't gone since I've gotten it. I go have lunch with all of my brothers everywhere else. But so I think that this is certainly a happier resolution. I know where his heart is. I know what he's trying to do. So I say, more power to him. It's not gonna. I don't think that it's gonna hurt us one bit because the increments for this resolution is $500. That's 5 units. You have to purchase that amount to be a legacy builder. So at $500, that doubles what the per capita would be going to the lodge. And so if it costs $5 for a lapel pin, which they don't even cost that when you buy them in bulk like Grand Lodge does, then the lodge is better for it, and Grand Lodge long term is better for it. Can I add that's cool thing? With me. Go ahead.
I don't mean to sound, I don't want to sound too grumpy on this, but you know me, like I'm all for moving power to the subordinate lodges. I talk about this, that, we have this federated system and power's gotten too centralized. And, most Masons do want their lodges to be autonomous. They don't want too much oversight. We're Texans here. But if we're going to do that, lodges need to take care of their business. Like if the problem is that they're losing money because they can't raise their dues, and that is a lodge issue. You can't run to Grand Lodge with that. And like Jason Reichenberg just, put in the chat, his lodge already does something like this for their members and, gives them recognition and awards for doing this. Mm-hmm. And I think that's That's where this should be. It should be at the lodge level. Again, if you're going to take responsibility, you need to take responsibility.
You can't
Yes.
delegate success.
Yeah.
I agree. Great. All right, let's move on to what are we on, number 4?
Number 4, I'll take this one.
All right.
Since number 3 was taken from me. Number 4, I know he got the good one. Here I get this one. So, all right. So this one, therefore it be resolved. Article 60. So a lot of people don't understand completely how the what the dues card is, and we learned it here recently with our talk with Right Worshipful Billings. The dues card is actually a receipt. That's the receipt for paying your dues, right? So what this resolution is supposed to do, and I know that in the therefore it be resolved, it's supposed to say no expiration date to which dues are paid by paying Master Masons shall be filled in by the Grand Secretary. Either that or that sentence is supposed to be removed, because if you look at the whereas, so basically what it's saying is that now we have plastic cards. That was approved last year. We have plastic cards. And they printed out all these plastic cards with an expiration date. So the benefit of having these long-term plastic cards went out with the fact that there's an expiration date on it. So what they're wanting to do with this resolution ultimately, and it's pretty plain to see, because it says that because it notes it in the whereases, that plastic dues cards are more durable. It saves Grand Lodge $30,000 annually by requiring the to continue to print the expiration date, and the Grandview database can already check to see if someone is current on their dues and whatnot. So therefore, it be resolved, and the idea was to take out the expiration date, and they're going to have to amend this one, but that's what the intent of this resolution is, and I'm all for it.
Okay.
There's another one later on that's pretty similar that's saying, take out the secretary's signature, but I don't agree with that one. I do agree with this one here. And we'll get to that other one in the next episode, I think. But I agree with this. It's better for the environment. It's better for Grand Lodge. It saves money on the back end, so that we can spend it on other things, like maybe officer leadership training or something of that nature. So if we can save $30,000 a year somewhere, I guarantee you there's somewhere that we can put that money to put it to good use within our lodges.
Well, and I spent 4.5 years as a secretary of a lodge that at the time had over 200 members. You would be surprised how often guys, I forgot I had my wallet in my pocket when I jumped in the pool. I need a new dues card. That generates more work for the secretary, for the Grand Lodge, more postage to get it to you, all that stuff. And I can't tell, I don't want to ballpark a percentage, but it was fairly common that I would have to call up to the Grand Secretary's office and say, could you add this card to the run, please? And they'd have to print out another dues card. The plastic cards are great.
You know what made me ill? Yes, even better. You know what made me ill about this last time was they printed all these cards out, and then everybody wanted a card for every lodge. It's like, guys, your mother lodge is all you need. You only need one lodge. Everything
now,
else.
Dennis Yates.
Because no matter
How
where
many times do you see brothers in the basement trying to find all the year's coins, belt buckles, yada, yada, yada,
man.
because they collect things. Masons collect things.
I have seen a guy with dues cards like this, and he was bragging about it. It's like, dude, So
Yeah, you see how they sit lopsided at the dinner table because they got them all in their wallet.
he's got hip problems because of the stupid cards. Yeah, but I tend to love this one, and it was created by Justin Duty and or Right Worshipful Duty and Right Worshipful Billings together jointly. So it's something that they both thought of to great extent, and I think it's important to them. It's important to me.
Anything that
Because
streamlines the process,
Yes,
I'm all for. Simplifies.
except for the one removing the secretaries.
Well, and Dennis and I were just over in New Mexico at the binational meeting, and one of the grand officers from California pulls out his dues card on his phone, his digital dues card with the little code on it. He said, scan that with your phone. You scan it with your phone, and guess what comes up? All of his information in good standing with the Grand Lodge of California. So moving digitally is something that might happen soon, but having that barcode on those plastic cards, having that QR code. Sorry, I showed my age again, but having that QR code is something that's going to be very helpful when you have large events and you're trying to check people and make sure that they're current and up to date. So,
well, I'm going to show you my age. Something we learned the other day as well when we were talking to Right Worshipful Billings is that on the back of that card already, for those little country lodges that don't have a computer to scan a card or whatever with, you can call the phone number on the card and type in the specific number, and it will tell you if they're in good standing or not.
Well, the thing is, you might forget your dues card, but most people aren't going to forget their phone. You might lose your dues card. You might lose your phone, but what are you going to get back quicker? Probably a phone. You'll probably be at the phone store the next day getting a phone. So most people will have a phone. So it's smart to move that direction. I'm not opposed to doing cards. I think this is a move in the right direction, but I think we're already 10 years behind where we need to be, which is having it digitally. But at least we're moving. At least we're shifting. I think it's good.
Yes. Forward progress.
Yep.
All right, Park. You want to take this one?
Hold on, Mike.
6.
Yeah, I'll take this one, but I got it. My computer is having some issues, and y'all are blocked right now. Hold on 1 second. There we go. All right, we're doing resolution number 5 now.
6. No, you're right. 5. I'm sorry.
No, 5.
Sorry.
Yeah. So this one, Justin Duty submitted this one as well, and I'll say that I'm in favor of this one just out front. But what this basically does is Article 23. It used to say that the Grand Treasurer or Grand Secretary, when they are incapacitated to perform the duties of their office, the Grand Master can appoint an acting Grand Treasurer or acting Grand Secretary. And that word incapacitated, I think what it meant was if there was a medical emergency or something happened where they could no longer perform the duties of their job, you could appoint an acting one to fill their place. However, that's not the way it shook out in the past couple of years when we've had some trustees that were removed that were certainly not incapacitated. So
yes, they were forcefully incapacitated.
What this does is says that you have to have a unanimous vote of the remaining trustees to suspend, an incapacitated Grand Treasurer or Grand Secretary from their position, which again, I think is a very good thing. Because as we have seen over and over again, like you said, Justin, earlier, our law book can be weaponized. If there is a way to weaponize it, it will be found. And so you want to put as many checks and balances in there as possible to prevent it from being used that way. And I wish it wasn't used that way. Like, we're Masons, our laws are supposed to be used Masonically. I mean, that's what it basically tells us in the law book. But yet I've seen them used in the stuff that we have done, you'd see that in the federal government. Like, it shouldn't be done in Masonry. So I like this resolution.
It's something that's not needed until it's needed. So
exactly.
I agree.
Looks like
and some of the things you might have seen in a federal government back in the 1940s in another country. I'm sorry. Let's just keep it real.
Yeah.
This is Masonic improvement. So without getting Park into trouble, let's move forward. That's that's a good one. Let's move forward.
Now it's time for number 6.
I think we're all in agreement.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Justin.
Oh, you want me to do number 6?
Either or Carlton.
Yeah, let's let Carlton because he's.
I would actually
But-
prefer it because this one,
Because he's better spoken.
Yes.
I think I've got the gist of what this is,
Yes.
but the weird enumeration in the last portion has thrown me off as to what is actually being changed.
6. Article 165(6) is being changed in the last part.
Yeah. You seem to have a firm grasp on it, counselor. Why don't you jump in?
No, what? Yeah. Again, there are some issues with how these resolutions are drafted. The therefore be it resolved section of this one says Article 50 is being amended. Article 50 and Article 165 are being amended by this. But they didn't put a return after Article 165. And yeah, the numeration is a bit funky here. But what this is doing is basically adding a mandatory report of the board of directors and president of the Texas Masonic Charities Foundation. And the reasoning behind it is there's a lot of money at stake there, and they think that the brethren should know what's going on. I mean, I'm all for more transparency. I just don't, again, whether some of these things are actually necessary and will result in the transparency they want is debatable. Because again, if someone has issues, like there are other means, if an individual Mason is worried about how this money is being spent, there's other things they can do. A lot of times, and I don't mean to be flippant about this, but there are very few Masons who are actually reading these reports and watching these things when they're happening or paying attention to them. I'm not saying we shouldn't have them, but if the goal is to increase transparency, adding another committee report, I don't know if that's actually going to do it.
Yeah, adding another committee report verbally. I don't think that's going to do it. Let's put it in Grandview so that we have a record that we can go to and look at if we're concerned.
Mm-hmm.
But another committee report is just going to put everybody to sleep on an already long day with all the pomp and circumstance. That's a big day of pomp and circumstance.
Yeah.
And I'm with Cody too. Am I misremembering? I thought we had a report from them in the past, right? Again, I thought we did, but I might be wrong about that.
I don't remember. I agree with the sentiment here. Make the information available, but don't make it something we have to sit through. That probably worked at one time, but we have so many additional ways today to get information out instead of just sitting there listening to somebody talk. It's the same thing with the minutes. We have the opportunity now. The minutes are on the desk, and if you really are concerned about the minutes, you can go check the minutes. And people that aren't concerned about the minutes are going to zone out until it's over anyway. So I agree with the spirit of transparency, but I don't know that another additional report's the way to go.
I'm going to play the other side on this one for you guys, because there are a lot of brothers, myself included. My degree's in biology, herpetology specifically. So if you see a snake and you don't know what it is, send me a picture and I'll tell you. But so when they go through the finance committee reports, I depend on the brothers speaking on that to present it. And even better, I depended, especially in the last couple of years, I depended on the brothers who wanted to chime in on it and tell me why it was bad to accept a supplemental finance committee report, things like that. And again, when we're dealing with money, like we are here, I think it's a very good idea. I mean, we just spent a good 7 minutes talking about why do we have a 10% cap on doing educational seminars. This is a whole lot more money. And if there's somebody who's in the know that realizes that there's some tomfoolery or some fuzzy math going on, the place to address that and present that fact is to the Grand West, because ultimately we're responsible. Now, do I want more committee reports to drone on and on? No, nobody does. However, to Do they have to speak about the whole report? No. But to give the opportunity for someone to come up and say, this isn't accurate, this isn't correct, and here is why. I depend on that as a member of the Grand West. So take that for what it's worth, which is about nothing.
That's
About
very,
$8 to get you started.
very
No,
valid.
I agree with
That's
that.
very valid. It really is.
So that's the beauty of these conversations. And me and Dennis talked about this before. We came onto the show together with our own viewpoints, and those will change over time. That's why we're having this whole conversation about these resolutions. Is this is my thought, that's your thought, but your thought might have insight that makes me reevaluate how I feel, and vice versa. And so, no, I mean, don't feel apologetic or like if you disagree, say it, because I love to hear your side, and I don't disagree with anything you said at all.
Oh, I do. No, just kidding. No, but
I'm not
but
sure why you do herpetology, but other than that, everything else.
Well, because haven't you seen him in his scrubs? He sells snake oil. What do you expect?
Oh, okay.
So, so I agree with what Justin is saying, that and I like what you had to say, and it makes sense to me now. It's something that I see a value in. I still think that I can read a report. Maybe some people. I mean, it seems to me like the you guys got to stop talking in the chat. It seems to me like those guys can get a copy of this report. Why can't I get a copy of this report? Because he knew what he was going to come back at him with before we knew anything. So it seems like we could have gotten a copy of that report as well without having to sit through it, and that way we could go through it. And maybe it's a combination of both. Who knows? But that's why we do this show the way we do it, is so that, you know, every opinion is important. It matters, because the people who are listening to this, we're not here to put a marketing campaign on them on our views only. We're here to help educate them and help them make the best decision they can make based off of the information they've gained. So we're talking about it, hashing it out, and they're going to come up with their own decisions based off of that information. And that's what's important to me.
Are we ready for number 7? Anyone else have
Even though there's some that I'm really going to push. Not just kidding. Yeah, let's go on.
Who wants to tackle this one?
Oh, is this the one I think it is?
Well, I don't know, because
I'll tackle this one. I'll tackle this one. I've got definite opinions on this one. Okay, so this one, they're trying to, the gist of this is they want the Grand Treasurer to have to file a report and actually write a report at every trustees meeting and every let's see, the Grand Annual Communication, which he already does that, and then they want a detailed statement of all funds and any assets. They want to know if anything is different, if there's a variance between what somebody has budgeted for their year and what they're spending on their year, and they want it to be per month, so that the budgets have to match up month per month, and they want all these things from the Grand Treasurer that is a voluntary elected position and not a paid position. They want this guy. We have a firm that does all this stuff, that can create all these reports for them. We have a finance committee, and we have a what's the word I'm looking for? An audit committee for this specific purpose. If there's an issue with the books, then they go in at any time at the call of the Grandmaster. They can go in at any time and perform an audit of the books and see what's going on, to see if everything's on the up and up with the books of Grand Lodge. And with this one, they're wanting to put all kinds of work onto our grand treasurer every month. And beyond that, at every trustees meeting, and he has to, speak on the report. He has to write a report and speak on the report at every trustees meeting. He can't just give a variance report like most nonprofits have. He has to actually create another report on top of that, and he has to talk on all these different points that are in this resolution. I think that I think that in the name of transparency, I'm going to be very transparent on how I feel about this, and I think it's a dig on our grand treasurer, and I think it's ridiculous that they're doing this. It has everything to do with last year and nothing to do with this year.
So that's something I was going to say, and I was going to say, correct me if I'm just being paranoid.
I'm sorry, you just caught my.
No, because it really irked me.
It's something I'm really frustrated
because it reads to me as though this is a knee-jerk reaction to past allegations, and people are trying to create like gotcha situations.
I'm sorry.
May I chime in on this one?
Go ahead.
Sure, go right ahead.
If you look at the final statement before the giant list of names, originally it said that these were going to be monthly reports where they would have to match everything month over month. Now, in this copy, and I don't know if this is a typo or if this was an adjustment that was made from the time they submitted it, and then working with the jurisprudence committee, maybe they changed this. But now we're under where it says monthly report to finance and audit committee, it says quarterly. Now that's a whole lot more digestible in the terms of some of this work that they're asking to do. And quite frankly, it makes more sense when you budget items that have a yearly budget and you pay for them all in January or February. And then you have to explain for the next 11 months why you're over budget still, right? Because it hasn't equaled out to that. Or you have to break it down and divide it month over month. It's like you said, it's cumbersome. But if this changes there, where it's not new monthly reports and it's quarterly reports, then I can see a path to where there might be some amendments from the floor to perhaps keep some of the spirit of transparency that this is under the guise of, and reduce some of the minutia that's being focused on. But again, I will trust the finance committee and the audit committee, the grand treasurer, and these several sponsors to debate that. And
this is my point in this, is that the business of Grand Lodge is run by Grand Lodge during the year with these monthly reports, and then quarterly on top of that, as it originally read. And I may be wrong now. Reread it real quick and tell me if I'm wrong. But to me, it looked like it was both. And what it looks like to me is a report going out to the Grand West to nitpick on every line item of our budgetary expense every month and try to find something to waste resources on, because what's going to happen is, based on what's previously happened, my interpretation of what could happen is that people are going to be specifically looking for very minor flaws in anything, and if they see one, then they're going to raise up in arms and say, we need an audit report, we need a finance committee involvement, we need an audit report, we need all of this, and we need it all within the next 30 days, or we're going to have his head. That's how I see it. And I I do not take this lightly. I think that, we elect people competent to do a job.
We're supposed to anyway.
We have certain processes already in place where they receive monies, they deposit monies, and they give the receipts to an outside firm who handles all the actual bookwork, so that there's nothing for somebody else to really screw up unless a receipt isn't given or something like that, right? If a receipt's not given, it's going to be caught, right?
Correct.
So, and that was the
other problem.
hoopla of last year, is that the receipts were missing, and all of a sudden, we have all these reports. People were added to committees and fired from committees because the reports weren't saying what they wanted them to say. And then we got an outside law firm involved that shouldn't have been involved because it wasn't with trustees' pre-approval. We had all this happen looking for a smoking gun. So with these kind of things, sure, it's under the guise of transparency, but I believe that it's under the guise of just searching for a smoking gun that's probably not there.
It's not about weaponizing the law. It's about providing ammunition.
I just want to add to Dennis, I agree with what you said. I mean, we delegate this authority. I mean, sometimes it doesn't work out the way we wanted it to. So we do need transparency and checks and balances with this. And like you said, it's difficult to argue against more transparency. But again, I mean, the trustees vote on the budget. The budget is prepared, and the finance committee has their say. Here's my problem, is that I know who this is directed at. But if it's people go over budget all the time. You have grandmasters who are like, I need to buy coins to sell for the library. Oh, well, that's $60,000. Well, that's not budgeted, but just, buy the coins. Like, or I need to do this or this. Like, this is very common, and they talk about it in the trustees meeting. The trustees have to ratify it. Like, if something exceeds one of the budget items, it's why did this exceed the budgeted amount? Like, do we agree with the explanation? And then they vote for it. And then again, we get the report at Grand Lodge, and we ratify that. And we have finance committee, we have auditors. I mean, more transparency is great, but like you said, if you have people looking at line items that have been exceeded and like, this guy went over, he's pulling one over in Grand Lodge, but they weren't there at that trustees meeting to get the explanation or didn't know the trustees ratified it. I mean, this is being directed at a particular person, but it is going to hit everybody because that's ordinary course of business here. And we run a tight ship. I mean, Grand Lodge is doing very well. We have like 1.2, 1.3 million in expenditures, and we are breaking even and making a profit. I mean, we are doing well as our Grand Lodge, and our investments are well. Like, we're going to be cruising for the next 5 to 10 years. Like, our finances are good. Again, does this actually do anything with the work this is going to create? What is this actually going to alleviate? Is my question.
I don't think it should be done unless they have another resolution with it to make the treasurer's job a paid job, because it's just too much work for a voluntary elected position. I just think that that's wrong.
I would say,
I'd like to weigh in if I may.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. It's all right. I've looked extensively at this list of sponsors, and some of them are friends of mine. Some of them are guys I haven't met yet. And I know what you all are talking about with how this appears to be targeted. But again, going back to our earlier conversation about trying to assume the best intentions. Yes. And to Robert's good point, it's hard to argue against more transparency, but it is very easy to argue against micromanagement.
yes,
And so
good point.
There's got to be a happy medium there. But these things that they're asking for, not only would they have maybe uncovered some things that people are upset about, And I don't know if those things exist. But at the same token, they would have uncovered month over month that money was spent without trustee approval for that law firm to come in and do another search in the big game of gotcha that went on for the last several years. So it would have worked in both directions. And it would still, this transparency would work in both directions. Now, does that mean, and again, I think about Most Worshipful Chapman, who is a very steady hand on the tiller. We didn't need a year the other way like 2023 was. We needed calm. We needed to be reminded to act like Masons. We needed to, I heard a really good speech about that by some handsome guy when I was in Austin about acting like Masons. But just
you're going to make him blush.
Yeah, that this will be up for debate. It will be up for amendment, and it will be up for a vote. And to your good points, there's a lot of people who believe that this is a very targeted attempt. A lot of people, myself included, who believe it puts an undue burden on a volunteer position. However, there could be a happy medium that the audit committee, the finance committee, the grand treasurer come in and say, here's what we're willing to do, and this would accomplish it. If you think back, and please don't, I don't mean to get political, but we had a president in our lifetime who went to Congress and said, I want a whole loaf of bread. And they said, no. And he said, okay, what do I have to do to get half this loaf? And they discussed it. And that could be what we see on the floor, a lively and spirited debate with amendments and such between the sponsors of this bill and the brothers who were doing all this work, to where they could reach a happy medium. But as it sits, I agree that it's too cumbersome for an unpaid position. I agree that it lends itself to playing games of gotcha, but I don't necessarily believe that that's what all of the sponsors of this had in their hearts when they signed on to it. And that's my 8 cents worth.
Is I thought Grand Treasurer was a paid position. Is it voluntary?
No, it's voluntary.
Oh, I did not know that. That's a lot of work for a voluntary position.
Yes.
I'll just say this.
With no staff.
And first of all, I appreciate Carlton's reminder that we should always assume the best out of a brother, because it made me reevaluate what I was going to say. And so I appreciate you keeping us on check. But I will say this. A budget is essential for any organization. However, and transparency is essential, especially in an organization as big as ours. But I will say this. A lot of people that are not familiar with budgets, excluding present company, probably don't understand that a budget is not an ironclad obligation to spend X amount of money and no more, no less. It's more of a guideline, it's used to estimate your costs in your profit by the end of your year. It's not meant to be used as like some kind of a gotcha, because like was pointed out, you may be under budget, you may be over budget. There's all kinds of factors that you can't account for throughout that entire year. And so this kind of feels as though, like, if you create a budget and anything deviates at all, it should raise questions. And sometimes that's the case, but I don't think that like has been pointed out, this is going beyond transparency towards micromanagement. And like I've said, I'm trying to assume everyone's just doing this for the best. They want what's best for Texas Freemasonry. However, I don't think that piling more responsibilities on the people in this level of micromanagement is beneficial.
Y'all said it much better than I did, and I still won't apologize for it.
No,
because I believe it. Apologies are a sign of weakness. Mm-hmm. That's what an old past master told me.
I'm sorry you feel that way.
We're coming up on 90 minutes now.
Yeah.
But
And
what?
we're at the halfway point in the resolution, so maybe we should downshift a little bit.
Okay, real quick. My only point though, because we're in this one and our listeners are listening, is that last year that expenditure on the outside firm, that was not done on the up and up. That was done and promised to be paid externally from the Grand Lodge, and none of the trustees knew about it. So it wouldn't have been on the books. It was never on the books until after the fact, when Grand Lodge realized, well, here we are after all this has happened, and we're on the hook for this because this trustee said that we were going to pay for it. So now we have to pay for it. And then it was agreed upon to pay for it. It wasn't when it happened, and it wasn't shortly after it happened. It was way after the fact, after it was found out that it was not proper to be done, that it was actually approved by the trustees just to get it off the books. But we'll move on from there.
I do want to point that out. I can't say much about that, but yeah, it was approved. It was ratified eventually.
Yeah, ultimately it was ratified and paid, right? But it was way after the fact. Is what I'm saying.
Let's move on to number 8. Does anyone want to take that one?
I'd be happy to.
Looks pretty straightforward. Go ahead.
Yeah, number 8 is very easy. It basically says that we will give the Grand Master, and I'm not a big fan of giving the Grand Master extra powers, but this is one that I do believe should rest in the Grand East. We've dealt with wildfires, we've dealt with hurricanes, we've dealt with tornadoes. This is Texas. It's a big land where we have a lot of natural occurrences that go on. So this resolution number 8, basically says that if there is a state or national emergency declared somewhere that encompasses the state of Texas, and it happens to fall during when the law book says we are to have our elections, because it's very specific with St. John's Day when we have to have our elections and when installations must be completed. This gives the Grand Master the ability to grant dispensation to delay the election until such time as, and it's very specific in here, the Grand Master shall have discretion to postpone the annual election of officers only in the event of a local, state, national, or world crisis when lodge members may be exposed to unsafe conditions. An election so postponed must be conducted within 15 calendar days of the end of the crisis. So when the government that has enacted this says the crisis is over, then you have 15 days to continue. It's really just cut and dry, simple, that we should be able to help lodges that through no fault of their own are not able to comply with that section of Grand Lodge law, and for the Grand Master to determine, yes, this is reasonable, it passes the smell test because this is a declared emergency. I grant you that dispensation. And then also for him to send word through official channels, you have 15 days because the governor, the mayor, whoever just said that this emergency is over. You have 15 days to submit all your paperwork and get it done.
I think it's just reasonable. Or God forbid we have another 2019 or something like that.
Well, that was going to be my point. And I agree. This is not a bad resolution. It's not. I am concerned though, because it is pretty open-ended to 15 days after whatever it is. We have certain things that have to be decided by certain times so that certain reports and certain things can be done to uphold our charters and our membership in this fraternity. Most importantly, our corporate standings, right? And so that kind of concerns me that it would be indefinite until after the crisis, because we did go through COVID. And for me, I don't see an issue with having a holdover if you got an issue like COVID, because you're not going to need anyways. So it would allow, things to get done by the officers that are there. in the meantime. At least amend it to state that, you know, business would be conducted as usual by the current officers until said time. Something like that. That would be my only concern. Otherwise, it's a great resolution. I think it's necessary.
Well, I'd like to do, to Carlton's point earlier, it is getting late. And I don't mind staying up later, but I know some of y'all might not want to. Let's 9 and 10 are pretty short. I don't know if 9 really is going to justify a whole lot of conversation or not, but let's try to push through 9 and 10. So at least we're almost halfway, kind of almost halfway, 33% of the way.
Yeah.
And we can, but we already knew this was going to be a multi-part series anyway.
Yeah.
So let's do the 10 because we did promise.
It was going to be a
also.
2-part, you loser.
Well, we did promise a Q&A, so I want to be sure we have time for that before it gets late. So
Okay.
let's hit 9 to 10, and then we'll open for Q&A and go from there.
Before we go there, Justin, just for 1 second, I used my phone a friend function, and I have confirmed that the Grand Treasurer receives no salary. He does have an expense account like every other Grand Trustee for travel and such, but he has the smallest budget of any trustee for what he can and can't do. Just so that we're clear about what we said earlier. And please just to note also on number 8 that Tucker Lodge, Serenity Lodge, and Cade Rothwell Lodge, they're all right down here, South Houston, or south of Houston and in South Houston in Hurricane Alley.
Yeah.
Where they have been severely affected, just so you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you said, Texas is so big. There's so many natural disasters that can affect us. It just makes sense.
Right. And like I said, it's not a bad resolution.
No, I don't think so either. Let's move on to number.
It worries me for the bigger pandemics and stuff.
Let's move on to number 9. Who would like to take that one?
I would like Robert to take that one because it's my understanding that this is already the law.
Well, I get what they're getting at here. Title V is a mess. I think everybody knows that. It's very unworkable for most Masons. But there are some things that don't make a lot of sense in it. Like, you know, it's all building towards the disciplinary proceeding, but there is stuff in there about depositions and discovery and motion practice, but it doesn't give any guidance as to what kind of discovery do you get? Like, what kind of motion practice do you get? What kind of depositions can you take? And so basically the trial master really has broad discretion. What happens in practice is that anyone who's a trial master uses the, you know, basically Texas rules of evidence, the Texas rules of civil procedure anyway. But it's more like an arbitration where they can basically do whatever the hell they want, because there's no appeal. You're not going to get your conviction overturned on a procedural ground in a Masonic trial. Yeah, so again, you can state that it'll be governed by these rules, but if you're not a litigator or an attorney, I mean, Title V is already as insane as it is for any non-attorney. If you're going to incorporate the Civil Practice and Remedies Code and the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure, you are making this further incomprehensible, you know, to the average Mason. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Because if you go in front of the trial judge and say, hey, I want, you know, level 3 discovery in this case with this many, blah, 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 you'd be like, no, we're doing this. Or no, we're doing this. You can object to evidentiary grounds. The trial master will be like, no, we're going to hear it all, and I'll just consider it. I'll give it the weight I think it deserves. Like, again, none of this. Trial master can do whatever he wants to. You know, they try to go by this. So that way, you put it in there. It's not going to hurt anything. That's what they're doing anyway. But it's not like, again, you're not going to get a case overruled or overturned on appeal on a procedural issue here. In my mind, Title V needs to be completely redrafted, which is being worked on right now. And the idea is to move it into an arbitration type setting. We just passed a law on, you know, the session last time that gives us arbitral immunity. And so we don't have to worry about getting sued for defamation anymore if you bring charges against somebody. So that's the way. Title V is not long for this earth. I will tell you that.
Yeah. And on that note, I say let's just, you know, let this one wash away with it and not vote it in. I'm not for adding more complexity to Title V.
Well, it might become obsolete with Title V changes anyway. And so let's let whatever Robert's talking about take place. And then if it still seems necessary, we can revisit it. But I agree. Let's not convolute the water more than it already is, if we can help it.
Now, number 11 actually raises a question I'm glad Robert's still up for after partying so hard on his birthday. But pardon me, number 10.
Oh, okay. I was
Right.
like, oh,
Sorry, where it looks specifically at about jurisdiction.
10 is in
Because-
direct conflict with another article. That's
Yeah.
the problem.
Yeah, this goes into conflict specifically with things that have to be tried at Grand Lodge.
Oh, and also if 518, Article 518, number 5, says that all Masonic disciplinary procedures shall be held in a neutral lodge, which is in direct conflict with the statute that says it can be held, in a lodge where it occurred, because that would not be a neutral lodge. Like, this is my problem with Title V. You have stuff like that, and then later on it says the Grand Master has to move it to a neutral lodge. So when people read that, they're like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like, we can have it here, but we can't. So again, if they're going to have this resolution number 10, they would have to amend a couple other things for this even to make sense.
Well, and I don't like this really that much anyways. It's supposed to it's supposed to be impartial on both sides when you're dealing with a Masonic charges, and much to the idea of arbitration instead of these trials like this. I'm just not a big fan of moving it to where everybody is going to be pals with somebody who did something wrong, and I don't think that's fair for the prosecution. And granted, I think there's been injustice with the other way around.
Yeah.
But I think that impartiality is the most important thing in these matters, and that having it somewhere where the issue occurred is like having pitchforks and sticks of fire coming after them, and then having it in their own home lodge is like everybody protecting them from the things that they may have done.
Well,
I think that's why I think it's good that we have a neutral lodge to go to.
think about it like in our justice system, you have a right to a fair trial to be with a jury of your peers that are unbiased, right? So if you committed a murder and the jury consisted of the victim's family, that's not very unbiased, right? It's
Allegedly committed a murder.
But if something allegedly happened in your lodge and you had to have the trial in your lodge, the jury is going to consist of members they're going to be biased one way or the other. So
Right.
I agree with keeping it, and I feel like I know where they're coming from when these were drafted. I think I know what the spirit of these is, but I
Right.
think this is more of a Title V issue.
Yeah, I think they were their hearts were in the right places, but I just don't think it's the solution.
I know we said we were going to stop at 10, but looking at 11, it's the same guys, the same spirit. Do we want to go ahead and tackle that real quick while we're already on this? That way, when we pick up, we're on at something, because this is Tiny Hill talking about Title V again.
Yeah, I just don't think, in resolution number 11, it basically adds that guilt found on for the burden of prosecution, that guilt must be found beyond a reasonable doubt.
I think that's fine. Yeah.
Well, I just don't, there's no way that we're going to have the level of evidence. We're not supposed to be recording things in lodges. We're not supposed to be doing all these things where it's beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, I think that doing it more like a civil course where it's like based on a clear preponderance of the evidence or something like that might be a little more palatable. but I think that resolution number 11 is going to cause several of Robert's professional colleagues to take the stand or to take the microphone.
Well,
To
it depends on what you want. Again, we are not, we're conflating Masonic law with, Texas law or United States law, where, we have a lot of protections for the individual, because we want to protect them against the power of the state, the greatest extent possible. It just comes down to, do you believe Masonry should be doing the same thing? I mean, once you're a Mason, should it be easier to get you out or harder to get you out? Should you have rights like an American citizen, or are our laws meant to be easier to enforce so we can get people out that we think did something wrong, but not rise to that insane level that we have for American citizens? Again, I tend to err on the side of just, that's why I'm fine with this, honestly. The way I've seen our disciplinary laws, used in the past, especially recently, I would lean more towards, making it harder to kick people out through this process, honestly. But I get where you're coming from, because that's a valid question. I mean, we are a fraternity, and just because you were able to be initiated doesn't mean you have the rights, these protected rights of an American citizen in our justice system. So yeah, that's an interesting question there, Carlton.
And once you once you put that verbiage in there, then it's going to be, we're all Law and Order fans, and we all watch it diligently, and we know exactly what the verbiage is. We know all the right things to say. So we know that if that verbiage is in there, we're going to immediately go to civil and civil code anytime we get into trouble, and we're going to match our laws up against theirs, up against the secular world. So I think that the less we can bring the secular world into our world, the better, in my opinion.
Good point.
You know what? I think we have enough time, because we blew through those last ones. If we could, because this is one that I think really deserves a lot of attention, is number 12.
Okay.
Where past Master Charles Summers of Newton Lodge 136 is attempting to stop having nominations from the floor. So when you read number 12, when it talks about statements of availability, the changes that he is proposing is a statement of availability filed after the 15th day of July and up to including the 15th day of November shall be forwarded to the lodges by the Grand Secretary in the December Grand Secretary's communication. No statement of availability will be accepted after the 15th day of November. However, we can elect an eligible member without a statement of availability for any office that has no candidates due to vacancy, death, or withdrawal. So basically what this article does is, or this resolution would do, would stop the ability for someone to be nominated from the floor without any forewarning that they were going to do that.
I would say absolutely, positively not. Freemasonry is a democratic organization. It is part of who we are, and I know there are Grand Lodges that are way less fluid in how their Grand Lines go and how nominations and everything goes. But that is one thing I love about Texas Freemasonry. And this I may be wrong. Again, maybe I shouldn't assume anything like we're talking about, but this reads as though someone was not happy with the way things went last year, and this is their reaction to it. And I would say the ability to have resolutions from the nominations from the floor is an important part of who we are.
And here's my issue. He says the reasons why he's doing this from the whereas clauses is because the statements of availability are necessary for everyone to know the qualifications of the candidates. I will tell you this: if you're going to run from the floor and win, people are going to know what your qualifications are.
Yes.
Like if nobody runs from the
you
floor, you ain't getting elected. So the only way someone's going to win from the floor is if something really bad happened with the other candidates, or like it's not going to be some Yahoo we don't know that stands up and wins an election from the floor.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I will not be nominated for the floor this year.
No, but
Speaking of Yahoo,
what I would like to see there actually is that no statements of availability are accepted after the 15th day of November from anyone who has previously lost an election for any Grand Lodge position and that was their preceding election. So if somebody has run for
I see what you're
South,
saying. Yeah, that's interesting.
or let's say they were the Grand Senior Warden and got voted out, then they can't run from the floor and skirt the accountability to address the issues of why they didn't get elected.
Interesting.
I like that idea because it goes back to accountability, right? But as this is written, as it stands right now, I don't see it passing. And even with the bad taste that because let's face it, last year the election that was a landmark election, the difference was only 300 votes, plus or minus, right? About 300 votes. So there was a goodly number of brethren that were very upset about that didn't like it. I've had them voice that opinion as recently as at the District 30 MWSA forum to me. And I understand that. And they're entitled to be upset with the way things happen because, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and you don't have to like it when you lose, right? But at the end of the day, to Justin's good point about how the system works in Texas, these automatic lines, if you visit other jurisdictions, you'll see, yeah, we're stuck with this guy for 3 more years and he keeps doing this and he's done that and he disregards the law and he's disrespectful to people. There's no way to get him out. There's no remedy. Now, again, we've never needed it before. Last year was the first year that it really came about. But I just don't see this passing.
I hope not, personally. Robert, do you have any thought?
Go ahead.
I was just going to add that I want anyone who wants to run from the floor. Like, I think you should be able to. Like, no matter what your past history was, if you want to get nominated from the floor, go ahead and try it. I think that's a good thing. Like, again, that is putting the power with the Grand West. I agree with the accountability issue, but you always want to try to rig the system in your favor once you get into power, and that's kind of what we're fighting against here. Like, if you want to run from the floor, go for it. It might go well. It might end up very bad.
Usually not very well. There's only one exception.
Right. That's kind of how I feel about it too, is that, realistically, the odds are not in your favor. It's kind of like that movie. I can't remember what it's called. May the odds be in your favor.
Mockingbird. Hunger Games.
Yeah.
Hunger Games. Yeah.
Mockingbird. Yeah. So may the odds be in your favor. I mean, really, if you're nominated from the floor, the odds are very against you. And if you win, there's a good reason you won. And I think it's a good thing. I do
Mockingjay, not Mockingbird. Okay.
Whichever one. But I do kind of like the idea that Carlton had on not allowing somebody who just lost to be nominated from the floor. And the only reason I say that is because I like somebody who is removed from the line. And the reason I say that, because then it's not a back and forth, trying to get back at each other. It's just, come on, let's just move on and move forward. I get it. But at the same time, you don't want to taint democracy.
Well, the thing is, after Carlton said that, I was like, we wouldn't do that. And then I thought about last year. I was like, yes, we would. Yes, we would. So I agree to that. So we got to number 12. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and we'll wrap up. So this is the public aspect, right? This is what's going to go on general YouTube, and then we'll do the Q&A, which is members only, and that we'll call that part 1. How's that sound?
Fantastic.
Sounds good to me.
All right. So thanks everyone for watching. If you want to see what happens after this, I guess you should join the inner circle. Peace out.
Keep it between the points.
All right.